In the house he had helped build with his own hands, Mr. Arthur was treated like an obstacle. His daughter-in-law denied him a glass of water, called him a burden, forbade him from sitting at the dining table, and humiliated him with sharp commands in front of the cleaning lady. Day after day, contempt became routine, cruelty the norm. What does an elderly father who gave everything for his family deserve? In Brentwood, Los Angeles, the kitchen air was thick with a warm humidity. Steam from a forgotten pot mingled with the smell of bleach and reheated beans. The fan whirred with an uneven breath, and the refrigerator pulsed, harsh, like a mechanical heart. On the table, coffee cups bore the marks of red lipstick on a plastic tablecloth with faded flowers. In the sink, glass tumblers were stained with hard water spots. Mr. Arthur, 79 years old, his thin t-shirt stuck to his skin with sweat, approached the faucet with a plastic cup. His trembling hand touched the knob, but before he could turn it, the sound of sharp heels, like a metronome, froze him in place. Camilla, his daughter-in-law, strode into the kitchen. Her expensive perfume clashed with the damp smell. Her nails were impeccable, and her latest generation phone reflected a white glare onto her designer glasses. "What are you doing, Mr. Arthur?" Her voice sliced through the air. It wasn't a question, it was a verdict. "Water, my dear. I just wanted a little water." "Not that cup. I've told you the blue ones are for guests. And don't waste water. It's only Tuesday and the rationing doesn't end until Friday." The washing machine rattled in the adjacent utility room. The cold tile bit at Arthur's bare heels. He returned to his worn wooden stool next to the basin of wet laundry he needed to hang before noon. The heat was oppressive, but he didn't dare take off his faded cap. Camilla, meanwhile, stacked boxes from food delivery services, kicked a chipped plate onto the floor with her foot. "For Grandpa," and swiped off the soft music playing from a small speaker. She answered a text with a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Maria, when you're done with the bathroom, give the old man his food. Yesterday's leftovers will do." From the hallway, Maria, the housekeeper who came 3 times a week, lowered her eyes and nodded. Her hands, chapped from the bleach, squeezed the cleaning rag as if trying to wring out the words she couldn't say. In the living room, separated from the kitchen by a frosted glass door, the air conditioner hummed with arrogance. It was another world, Camilla's world. Leather sofas, minimalist paintings, and perfectly aligned architecture magazines. The door to Brentwood, Camilla's external universe of boutiques and restaurants, and the door to the backyard, the world assigned to Arthur with its buckets and brooms, seemed like borders between different countries. "Julian will be late tonight. He has a dinner with investors," Camilla announced while checking her digital planner. It wasn't information, it was a reminder of absence, of who had a voice and who didn't, of who made the decisions. Mr. Arthur swallowed hard. His voice wouldn't come. The wall clock ticked off a long minute that dragged with the weight of humiliation. The silence, heavy with shame, fell like a stone, tightening the chests of everyone present. "Mr. Arthur?" Maria whispered once Camilla disappeared into her home office. She discreetly handed him a glass of water. "Drink it quickly." Their eyes met in a silent alliance, but the sound of the office door opening made Maria snatch her hand back as if the glass burned. Sophia, the 10-year-old granddaughter, ran in wearing her school uniform, her smile briefly illuminating the kitchen's gloom. "Grandpa!" She ran to hug him, but stopped short upon hearing her mother's voice from the hall. "Sophia, your homework. We've talked about priorities." The girl hesitated. Her dark eyes darted from her grandfather to the doorway, from affection to duty. Finally, she planted a quick kiss on Mr. Arthur's wrinkled cheek and ran to her room. The old man closed his eyes for a moment, treasuring that second of warmth, like a jewel. When Maria finished her cleaning, she approached the old man again and left him a sweet roll wrapped in a napkin. "I bought it at the corner bakery, so you have something in your stomach." Mr. Arthur took it with trembling hands and tucked it into the pocket of his worn pants. His moist eyes expressed the thanks his mouth didn't dare to speak. Outside, the afternoon settled over Los Angeles like a heavy blanket. The kitchen lights remained off. Camilla said they needed to save electricity. In the growing dusk, Mr. Arthur's silhouette faded against the wall, smaller and smaller, while the water he hadn't drunk continued to drip from the poorly closed faucet, its repetitive sound marking the passage of empty hours. In his room, a small converted utility space next to the laundry, Mr. Arthur pulled a worn vinyl wallet from under his thin mattress. Inside, a yellowed newspaper clipping showed his son, Julian, smiling with a trophy. "Young Engineer Wins Tech Innovation Award," the headline read. His fingers caressed the image as if he could touch the pride he felt that day. Next to the clipping was a worn rosary, the last gift from his wife, Lucy, before cancer took her. The night deepened, and with it came the sounds of the large house. The television in the master bedroom, Sophia's occasional laugh, the clinking of wine glasses, the good ones, the ones he couldn't use, as Camilla poured herself a drink. Mr. Arthur lay down on the unmade bed, fully clothed. Tomorrow he had to wake before dawn to wash his son's car and water the plants, before everyone else woke up, before he could be a nuisance, before he existed too much. Before this kitchen divided into two worlds, there were dirt roads in a small town in Taurus, the Midwest. Mr. Arthur was born to calloused hands, to a laundress mother and a bricklayer father who never learned to read but could calculate distances and weights with mathematical precision. At 12, he was already carrying bricks. At 15, he was a porter at the city's central market, his back bent under the weight of fruit and vegetable crates. Dawn always found him on his feet, his stomach empty, his shoes worn through by the sidewalks of the city that grew voraciously around him. He met Lucy while she was selling cornbread at a makeshift stall. She hemmed clothes for extra money and sang old love songs as her fingers flew over the fabric. They married with a friend playing the accordion and a small party where food was more plentiful than money. In their first few years, they had a daughter, Marianne, with big eyes and an easy laugh. A harsh winter found her with fragile lungs, like sharp blades that cut off her breath on a freezing night. They buried her with her favorite rag doll and a candle that Mr. Arthur kept lit every November 2nd for years. "Life goes on, my love," Lucy would say as they tucked their grief away in a small metal box next to a black and white photo, the only one they had of the three of them. "God doesn't give you more than you can handle." Arthur learned then to save coins in a coffee can, to ask for little, and to be grateful for bread and a roof over his head. From this patience forged by hardship, he built a home. When Julian was born 3 years later, joy returned like warm water on a wound. That restless, curious boy was raised with few words and a powerful example. Rise early, keep your promises, and share what you have. The city pushed them with its ever-rising rents, its impossible distances, its indifference. He pushed back with silent dignity. "Study, my son," he would repeat as he prepared the cornbread batter before dawn so Julian could afford books. "Knowledge is the one thing no one can ever take from you." On nights of heavy rain, when water seeped through the tin roof, Mr. Arthur told stories of magical cities and enchanted mountains. He manufactured dreams while patching leaks. Lucy mended school uniforms and sold Jell-O to help pay for the private school where Julian excelled in math. The scholarship came like a blessing, engineering at UCLA. The three of them cried, huddled together, in front of the acceptance letter. Julian studied late into the night. Arthur worked double shifts. Lucy knitted scarves to sell, all so their boy wouldn't have to drop out. "It's worth it, my love," Lucy would whisper when exhaustion overcame them. "Our son is going to be someone." In his worn vinyl wallet, Arthur still kept the newspaper clipping, where Julian, a recent graduate, won a national tech innovation contest. That day, the young man took them to a fancy restaurant where the waiters looked down on them. Arthur didn't care. His chest swelled with pride as his son explained with complicated words the software he had created. "See, Lucy, every sacrifice was worth it," he told her that night as they counted coins for the bus ride home. Julian's success grew like a well-watered plant. A mobile payment app catapulted him into the world of startups. Foreign investors arrived with briefcases full of opportunities. The small rented room was replaced by offices in Century City. The money began to flow, first a trickle, then a roaring river. Julian visited them less and less, always in a hurry, his phone constantly ringing. When Lucy fell ill, the diagnosis came too late. Cancer, a 6-letter word that weighed like a tombstone. Julian paid for private hospitals, specialists, medications. But all the money in the world couldn't buy enough time. Before she passed, Lucy gave Arthur her wooden rosary, worn from years of prayer. "Make sure his success doesn't grow so fast it blinds him," were her last coherent words. Grief left Arthur in a suddenly large and empty house. The walls held echoes of a shared life. the chair where Lucy sat to watch her shows, the calendar where she marked the neighbors' birthdays, the small herb garden that now withered without her touch. Julian, lost in his own pain and the work that distracted him from it, visited even less. When he did, he brought expensive gifts Arthur didn't know how to use: smart TVs, complicated phones, noisy appliances. What the old man wanted, time, conversation, shared memories, didn't come in boxes with ribbons. He met Camilla at the funeral. She arrived on Julian's arm, wearing a designer black dress and heels ill-suited for the cemetery grounds. She spoke of private universities, tennis clubs, and trips to Europe. Her words were soft, but with a hidden razor's edge, and she surveyed Arthur's house like someone examining an archaeological relic. "It's charming, so authentic," she said, while her eyes communicated the opposite. The courtship was brief, the wedding spectacular. Arthur wore his only good suit, the one he saved for special occasions, and smiled for the photos, though he felt out of place amidst so much luxury and protocol. From his distant table, he watched his son, transformed into a stranger who talked about stocks and markets with people who drank champagne like water. "Your mother would be so proud," he said when they found a moment alone. Julian hugged him tightly, his eyes moist. And for an instant, he was the boy who asked for stories before bed again. Little Sophia was born a year later. When Arthur held her for the first time, he felt a circle close. In her dark eyes, he saw Lucy, little Mary Ann, all the women of his bloodline. 3 years ago, Arthur's house in Eastwood flooded during the rainy season. The water took furniture, memories, the box of Lucy's letters. Julian, genuinely concerned, offered what seemed like the logical solution. "Come live with us, Dad. We have plenty of room." The Brentwood apartment shone like another. Galaxy, marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, abstract art on the walls. Arthur accepted with the implicit promise to be useful, to not get in the way, to earn the space he occupied. In the beginning, Camilla smiled politely. Then the smiles became grimaces. Doors began to close. Permitted spaces shrank. Words became scarce. Now, clutching the worn rosary in the darkness of his makeshift room, Arthur fumbled through his memories like someone searching for a door in the dark. He knew Julian's heart wasn't born of marble like the floors he now inhabited. He waited, with the patience of an ancient tree, for something, at any moment, to fall back into place. The following week, the edges of that fragile existence hardened. Camilla, with calculated movements, rearranged a cabinet to make better use of the space. In reality, the shelves were now too high for Arthur to reach anything. A discreet silver lock, small as a metallic spider, appeared on the cabinet where the good dishes and glasses were kept. The excuse floated like a poisonous perfume. "It's just that guests ask about the china I inherited from my grandmother." On Tuesday, Camilla intercepted Maria in the hallway. Her voice, low but sharp, echoed off the freshly painted walls. "On doctor's orders, Mr. Arthur can't have any coffee. Don't even think about offering him any, understand? His heart is weak." "But ma'am, Dr. Evans never said—" "Are you questioning my decisions in my own home?" Camilla's eyes narrowed. "Do we need to talk about your immigration status? Because I can make a phone call right now." Maria looked down. The blackmail worked like a master key. Her work visa depended on this job, and the 3 children she supported back in Bolivia depended on the money she sent every 2 weeks. Silence became her only defense. The food Camilla set aside for Arthur grew more meager, sometimes with greenish spots or a sour smell that turned his stomach. The old man ate little and in secret, like a frightened animal. Once, he tried to bring it up at dinner, but Camilla cut him off with an icy smile. "You don't like what I prepared specially for you? How ungrateful after everything it costs us to keep you." Julian, distracted between calls and emails, barely looked up. "Dad, Camilla tries so hard. Just be grateful and don't make things difficult." The chores assigned to the old man multiplied like a spider's web. She ordered him to scrub the backyard patio until it's white as a hospital, and the coarse brush, like sandpaper, broke the skin on his knuckles. The industrial soap seeped into the cracks, burning like a liquid reminder of his position in the house. "Sir, use gloves," Maria whispered when she saw him scrubbing the floor on his knees. "The gloves are for Camilla," he replied with a sad smile. "My hands are calloused from a lifetime of work." The days passed in a silent procession. Arthur lost weight. His pants hung like a flag at half-mast, a new notch, improvised in his belt with the tip of a rusty screwdriver. The nights found him sitting on his chair by the laundry room, listening to the drip that marked the rhythm of a thirst that was more than physical. He was accompanied by a constant fear, like a skinny dog that wouldn't leave his side, the fear of, "You're getting out of here," a threat veiled in every one of Camilla's glances. It was not an unfounded fear. On Thursday, while dusting the master bedroom when everyone was out, he found a colorful brochure in Camilla's drawer. Golden Sunset Senior Living, a premier retirement community in Lakeview. Several pages were marked with sticky notes. One pointed to the rates for special cases. In an attached envelope, a medical appointment for geriatric evaluation had his name written in elegant script. "Already scheduled," said a note in Camilla's unmistakable handwriting. The date, tomorrow. Arthur sat on the edge of the king-size bed, so soft it felt like it might swallow him. The brochure trembled in his worn hands. He took a deep breath, trying to control the panic that rose like a tide. It wasn't the nursing home that terrified him. Loneliness was already his constant companion. It was the deceit, the decision made behind his back, as if he were a piece of old furniture they needed to get rid of. "My God," he murmured as he put everything back exactly where he found it. "What did I do wrong for my own son to erase me like this?" The loneliness bit harder in the afternoon when the apartment emptied, leaving only him and the humming appliances. Sophia, his granddaughter, spent little time at home. Camilla kept her busy with extracurriculars, language lessons, and activities scheduled down to the minute. When she was there, the girl would tiptoe down the hall to visit her grandfather, always looking over her shoulder to ensure she wasn't discovered in this forbidden complicity. "Grandpa," she'd say in whispers as she showed him colorful drawings or told him about her school day, "I brought you a chocolate, hide it well." The hugs were quick, almost fleeting, as if they were hiding their affection so it wouldn't draw attention. Arthur cherished these moments like treasures, crumbs of love in the desert of his current existence. At night, lying in his narrow bed, he remembered Lucy saying, "Make sure his success doesn't grow so fast it blinds him." He wondered if he had failed in that mission, if he should have done more, taught better, spoken more clearly about respect and dignity, or if perhaps money and power were rivers too powerful, capable of washing away even the deepest roots. At 3 a.m, thirst and restlessness woke him. He walked barefoot down the hall, avoiding the creaking floorboards, towards the kitchen for a glass of water. A faint light filtered from under the office door. Camilla's voice, a whisper as sharp as a razor, cut through the night's silence. "Everything's set. We'll sign the nursing. Home papers tomorrow, after the evaluation." A pause. She was on the phone. "I've already prepped Julian, told him his father is getting more and more confused. The doctors are aware. Yes, I explained the situation, that they shouldn't give him any water before the tests, so he seems more frail and won't argue as much." Another longer pause, a stifled laugh. "Of course Julian trusts me. He never questions anything when it comes to his father. He's too busy with the new expansion. I made sure to overload his schedule this week." Arthur leaned against the wall, feeling his legs might give out. His heart pounded so loudly he feared he would be discovered. From the other end of the hall, Maria, who was cleaning the living room, late for an important dinner the next day, also heard. Her eyes met Arthur's in the dim light. Fear paralyzed her, but her gaze trembled with contained outrage. With a superhuman effort, Arthur returned to his room. He sat on the edge of the bed and took the worn rosary from under his mattress. He squeezed it until the wooden beads dug into his palm. For the first time in months, tears rolled freely down his wrinkled cheeks. "Lucy," he murmured to the darkness, "give me strength for one more day." He understood, as dawn began to sketch gray outlines in the small window, that light doesn't arrive on its own. Someone has to turn it on. He promised himself that whatever tomorrow brought, he would defend the last bastion he had left, his dignity. In the kitchen, he made coffee for everyone, as he did every morning. As the water boiled, he looked at his hands, rough, stained, but steady. Hands that had built a family, raised a son, and supported dreams bigger than himself. Hands that, perhaps tomorrow, would have to say goodbye to everything they knew. "Good morning, Mr. Arthur," Maria greeted him as she came in. Her eyes communicated more than her words. "Do you want help with that?" No, my dear. Arthur straightened his back, just an inch, but it was enough. Today, I can manage on my own. The next day, Destiny walked in the front door unannounced. The meeting in Century City ended 2 hours early. The international consortium signed the expansion deal without major objections. Julian, feeling a mix of euphoria and exhaustion, decided to go home to share the news with his family. The Los Angeles traffic flowed miraculously, as if every light had conspired for this inevitable moment. As he entered the apartment, he was met by the cool silence of the air conditioning. He loosened his Italian tie and set his leather briefcase on the entryway table. In the living room, the perfectly arranged cushions and the sandalwood scent from the air purifier created the atmosphere of a home decor magazine. Everything in its place, everything under control, as always. Julian walked down the hall, looking for someone to share his professional triumph with. The payment app had closed $1 million deal that it would position them across Latin America. He wanted to celebrate, maybe open that bottle of wine saved for special occasions. From the kitchen, he heard a choked voice that seemed to come from a place deeper than the throat. "Please, just a little water." Julian stopped. He recognized his father's voice, but not the tone, pleading, almost childlike. He moved closer to the kitchen doorway, staying out of sight. Instinct, that dormant animal inside everyone, told him to watch without being seen. Through the doorframe, he saw Camilla with her back to him, elegant in her designer outfit, leaning over the marble island and checking something on her tablet. The white light from the screen cast a ghostly glow on her features. In front of her, sitting on a small wooden stool by the sink, his father looked like a shrunken version of the man he once was. Mr. Arthur held a worn plastic cup, almost translucent from use. "Don't use the good glasses," Camilla said, without looking up from her device. "Wait for Maria to get back from the market." The housekeeper, however, was right beside her, holding a pitcher of water. Her eyes darted from the old man to Camilla, and her hand trembled slightly as if fighting against an implicit order. Time thickened. No one moved. Julian was about to step in when Camilla, with a fluid, practiced motion, took a chipped plate and set it on the floor with a dry clack. "Grandpa's food," she said with a tense smile aimed at Maria. "Remember, just like yesterday." The glass of the refrigerator reflected his father, hunched over, and next to him, something Julian hadn't noticed before, a small silver padlock on the food pantry. It gleamed like a metallic accusation under the kitchen's cold light. In a second, as if a blindfold had fallen from his eyes, Julian saw everything he had refused to see for months. His father's hands, cracked deep like ravines in dry earth. The belt with its improvised notch that spoke of lost pounds. The papery skin that hung where there was once strength. The downcast gaze of someone who had learned not to expect kindness. And he heard, like a distant echo materializing in the present, Camilla add in a low voice, "If he can't understand the rules of this house, we'll take him to sign those papers today and the matter will be settled." Time stopped. Julian felt a ringing in his ears, as if all the half-finished conversations, the excuses accepted without question, the uncomfortable silences at dinner, had condensed into a single, painful moment of clarity. He stepped into the kitchen. 3 pairs of eyes stared at him with different emotions: surprise, terror, faint hope. "What papers, Camilla?" His voice sounded strangely calm. Camilla recomposed her expression in a millisecond. The mask of efficiency snapped back into place like a well-oiled machine. "Julian, honey, you're home early. We were just talking about some health plan documents for your father. Nothing important." Maria, pale as the porcelain she cleaned every day, broke the pact of silence imposed by financial fear. Maybe it was Julian's presence, maybe the accumulated outrage, maybe the image of her own father, whom she hadn't seen in 5 years. "That's not true, Mr. Julian," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Mrs. Camilla has been mistreating Mr. Arthur. She hides the food, puts a lock on the pantry, makes him sleep without a heater, serves his food on the floor like an animal. And today she was going to take him to sign papers to put him in a nursing home without you knowing the truth." The air grew thick, almost unbreathable. Camilla took a step toward Maria, but Julian held up a hand, stopping any attempt at intimidation. "Go on," he said, his calmness a stark contrast to the storm in his eyes. Maria swallowed hard. "I have recordings, sir. From when she talks on the phone at night, saying she has to keep Mr. Arthur from drinking water before his doctor's appointments so he'll seem weak and you'll agree to put him away. Saying you never question anything about your father because you're too busy with your business. Sophia, who had been looking for her backpack to go to a friend's house, stood frozen in the doorway. Her large eyes filled with water that, yes, ran freely and sincerely down her childish cheeks. "Mommy took Grandpa's blanket," she said in a tiny voice. "She says it smells bad, but it doesn't. And she throws his coffee away when no one is looking." Julian looked at his daughter, then at Maria, and finally at his father. Mr. Arthur kept his gaze lowered, as if he had learned that looking someone in the eye could invite more pain. The plastic cup trembled slightly in his hands. He walked over to the stool, took the cup from his father's hand, and filled it at the faucet, slowly, almost ceremoniously. The clear water swirled as it fell, hypnotic in its simplicity. "Dad, drink," he said softly. Mr. Arthur looked up, uncertain. He took the offered cup and drank slowly. The swallow sounded like a homecoming, a reclamation. Julian placed a hand on his father's bony shoulder and felt, beneath the worn fabric, all the frailty he had refused to see. He turned to Camilla, who maintained her composure, though a muscle twitched in her perfect jaw. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, stripped of the admiration and desire that had always clouded his judgment. "You don't get to decide today," he said, his voice low but firm, setting the first boundary in years of a lopsided marriage. "Today, I listened to my father." He took his phone from his pocket and dialed a number. "Mr. Almeida, I need you to come to the apartment right now. It's urgent. Yes, check my father's power of attorney and bring the documents to secure the deed of the Eastwood house in his name. I also need to make changes to my accounts and cards." "Exactly. Separation of assets, effective today." As he spoke, he never looked away from Camilla, whose eyes reflected first disbelief, then calculation, and finally the beginning of fear. Julian called his sister, Anna, who lived in San Diego and with whom he had gradually lost touch. Not by accident, he now realized, but through the subtle strategy of isolation he finally recognized. He summoned 2 neighbors from the building as witnesses. In less than an hour, the silent apartment would become a makeshift courtroom where the truth would finally have a voice. Mr. Arthur, feeling the firm hand of his son on his shoulder, straightened his spine by a millimeter. It was almost imperceptible, but it was enough. His dignity, after months of cowering in a dark corner, slowly began to breathe again. In the afternoon, the living room shed its usual coldness. The windows, always shut to preserve the air conditioning, were now open, letting in a warm breeze that carried the smells of the city. Fresh bread from the corner bakery, the faint perfume of magnolias from the nearby park, the real life that had always been kept outside. The designer sofas, arranged more to impress than to encourage conversation, now formed an intimate circle where the truth could be faced. Anna arrived with her hair carelessly tied back and dark circles under her eyes from driving 2 hours straight. She brought a worn notebook where she had chronicled years of frustrated visits, unanswered calls, and birthdays celebrated over the phone. Her hug with Mr. Arthur was long, as if trying to make up for all the ones she had missed. "Dad," she whispered against his rough cheek, "I'm so sorry." The neighbor, Mrs. Lupita, a 60-year-old woman from the apartment across the hall, brought what she had seen for months from her window: the food tray on the floor, the trash bags handed to Arthur as an impossible task for his arthritic hands, the long hours he spent on the service balcony under the merciless sun. "It's not right what they did to Mr. Arthur," she said, with the frankness of someone who no longer feared losing invitations to elegant dinners. "I'd see him from my kitchen, soaking stale bread in milk because he couldn't chew what they gave him." Mr. Almeida, with 30 years of experience in family law, reviewed documents with a grim expression as he listened to the testimonies. Beside him, an assistant took detailed notes on a tablet. Occasionally, he would nod, confirm a detail, ask for clarification. He didn't need to offer an opinion. His face said it all. Julian, standing by the television, projected the audio messages that Maria had saved out of fear and now shared out of dignity onto the large screen. Camilla's voice, crystalline in its coldness, filled the room. "Don't give him any water before the doctor's appointment. Make him clean the patio until it's spotless. If he gets tired, that's his problem. Tell him his room smells bad. Get him used to the idea of going somewhere else." The room was silent. No commentary was needed. The evidence spoke for itself with devastating eloquence. Camilla, perched on the edge of a sofa, as if ready to flee, tried to smile. Her face, perfectly made up for the occasion, showed invisible cracks. She searched for the right words, the ones that had so often worked to manipulate situations, to redefine reality to suit her interests. "This is a terrible misunderstanding," she said in a controlled voice. "Julian, honey, I've been under so much stress lately with the charity ball preparations. Things may have gotten out of hand, I admit, but always with the best intentions." She reached for Julian's hand, but he gently but firmly pulled it away. The thing about the water was a medical recommendation. Dr. Peterson said Mr. Arthur had to limit fluids because of his blood pressure. I have the messages somewhere. She frantically searched her phone, but everyone in the room saw the desperation behind the act. Sophia, from a corner where she had been drawing silently, looked up. "Grandpa never went to Dr. Peterson, Mommy. You told me not to tell." The silence that followed was as thick as fog. Camilla stared at her daughter with a mixture of disbelief and betrayal. It was the exact moment she understood she had lost all control, that no elaborate story could rebuild the shattered facade. Julian took a deep breath. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He didn't make a scene. There was a new quality to him, a quiet resolve he didn't know he possessed. "My father is not humiliated in this house," he said, standing before his wife. "Not him, not anyone." He handed her a printed document. "Separation of assets, effective today. Revocation of access to corporate accounts and family credit cards. You can leave voluntarily within 24 hours, or involuntarily right now, if you prefer." Anna, containing a rage that had built up over years of seeing her father slowly isolated, added, "And an elder abuse protection order. It's already in motion, with testimony of psychological abuse and deprivation of basic needs." Mr. Almeida nodded, confirming the legality of the actions. "You may check into a hotel while the division of assets is handled. All of Mr. Arthur's medical and rehabilitation expenses will be documented as part of the proceedings." Camilla took a half step back, as if struck by an invisible force. She clutched her high-end phone, her connection to an outside world that now seemed distant, and searched the room for allies who were not there. The people present, including Maria, who now served coffee with reclaimed dignity, watched her with a mixture of pity and revulsion. From the sofa, Sophia crossed the room and took her grandfather's hand. The simple gesture, filled with unconditional love, highlighted everything that had been missing in this home of shiny surfaces and cold hearts. The balcony door opened fully, and a warm breeze swept in, rustling the curtains as if the house itself were sighing in relief. The smell of freshly brewed coffee, Maria made it with the beans Mr. Arthur had always preferred, wafted through the room, restoring a sense of home that had been lost. There was no violence, only clear boundaries. Camilla's suitcases appeared in the hall, brought by the lawyer's assistant. The driver was waiting downstairs with precise instructions. Julian offered her a dignified exit, more than she had ever granted his father. "Leave without a scene, and we will handle this privately for Sophia's sake," he said, his voice serene but firm. "The lawyers will contact you tomorrow." Camilla tried one last gambit, a final appeal born of desperation. "You'll ruin your image, Julian. People will ask, the investors will talk, your reputation." Julian looked at his father, then at his daughter, and finally at his sister. In their faces he saw a simple truth he had forgotten in his years of chasing figures and applause. "I'd rather lose a contract than lose myself." The sentence hung in the air, a declaration of principles, the exact moment a man finds his moral compass again. Camilla picked up her designer handbag, adjusted her blazer, and walked toward the door with the artificial dignity of someone playing a role to the very end. Before leaving, she took one last look at the apartment she had considered her kingdom, the spaces she had divided like conquered territories. No one said goodbye, no one insulted her. There was only a silence that contained everything necessary: boundaries, consequences, justice. When the door closed behind her, something in the air shifted. The house, finally, could breathe. The people looked at each other, survivors of an invisible storm. Maria served coffee in porcelain cups, the good ones, the reserved ones, to everyone, including Mr. Arthur. There were no hierarchies in that moment, only people sharing a space of newfound truth. Arthur, seated at the table, not the relegated stool, not in a corner, felt that the tablecloth no longer burned his hands, that gazes no longer passed through him, as if he were transparent. He picked up the cup with slightly trembling fingers and drank slowly. The coffee tasted like reclaimed dignity. Julian sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder, like when he was a boy and they shared breakfast before school. Not many words were needed. The son's eyes spoke of regret, the father's of understanding. "We're going to fix this, Dad," Julian said, his voice hoarse. "Step by step." Arthur nodded slightly. The word respect, silent but present, had returned to its place in the home from which it had been exiled, and with it, the possibility of rebuilding what was broken. A week later, the city's central courthouse was as crowded as on a major sentencing day. The air conditioning fought against the accumulated body heat. Ceiling fans spun lazily over heads bent in whispered conversation. On the wooden benches, polished by years of waiting and verdicts, sat people from the Eastwood neighborhood, neighbors from the Brentwood building, and a journalist from a Sunday supplement who specialized in elder rights. The elder abuse complaint moved forward with a speed unusual for the city's bureaucracy, propelled by the clarity of the evidence. Audio recordings recovered from Maria's phone, testimonies from neighbors and staff, photographs of the locked pantry and the plate on the floor, medical records documenting weight loss and signs of chronic dehydration. Mr. Arthur, wearing a simple but dignified suit that Julian had bought for the occasion, sat with his back straight. His hands, still marked by a lifetime of labor, rested on a dark wooden cane he used not out of need, but for the newfound pleasure of owning something beautiful. Camilla, flanked by a lawyer with a stern expression and an impeccable suit, maintained her composure, though her foundation couldn't entirely hide the dark circles from sleepless nights. She listened to the ruling, with her gaze fixed on an indeterminate point on the wall. As if the judge's words were a storm she simply had to endure until it passed. "Considering the evidence presented and the testimonies collected," read Judge Wallace, a man in his 50s whose eyes had seen too much injustice to be easily impressed, "this court finds the complaint of psychological, emotional, and physical neglect against Mrs. Camila Rivas to be valid." A murmur rose in the courtroom before being silenced by a gavel strike. "I hereby order an immediate and effective restraining order prohibiting the defendant from approaching within 300 feet of Mr. Arthur Torres, a fine for moral damages to be donated to elder protection charities, forfeiture of administration of any family assets related to the victim, and 180 hours of mandatory community service at the dignified Twilight Senior Center in Eastwood, with professional supervision and a public report." The judge removed his glasses and looked directly at Camilla. "This court finds the abuse of trust and the systematic violation of the dignity of a person under your care to be particularly egregious. The sentence will be recorded in the public record and may be cited as a legal precedent in similar cases." The implications were clear. Her name, and her conduct, would cease to be a private matter and would become a lesson for the community. Not as a gratuitous humiliation, but as a moral line in the sand, a collective "not here." Camilla turned pale. Her world of exclusive contacts, elite event invitations, and society column appearances teetered on the brink of a tarnished reputation. She tried to whisper something to her lawyer, but he just shook his head. The consequences were non-negotiable. Julian, standing beside Anna, signed documents committing to the care and protection of his father. Nothing extraordinary, simply what should have been natural from the beginning. Maria received a new contract, guaranteeing job security, full benefits, and a commendation for her courage in reporting the abuse despite the personal risk. Sophia handed the judge a drawing of her grandfather sitting at a table with her and her father. The magistrate accepted it solemnly, understanding the message that transcended the childish scribbles. True justice rebuilds what was broken. Stepping out of the courthouse into the midday sun, Mr. Arthur took a deep breath. There was no triumph in his expression, only the tranquility of a man who had been heard after a long, imposed silence. In Eastwood, the news spread like wildfire. They got justice for Mr. Arthur. The fancy daughter-in-law got what she deserved. The son finally opened his eyes. It wasn't malicious gossip, but a community's confirmation that a moral order exists and, though sometimes delayed, eventually reasserts itself. The entire neighborhood seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, as if the victory of one of their own was, somehow, a collective one. That afternoon, back at home, Julian's house, which was now transforming day by day. Arthur tasted the first beef broth made especially for him, with soft vegetables his teeth could chew without pain and the exact amount of salt he always preferred. The steam no longer smelled of punishment, but of care. The open window let in the sounds of children playing in the nearby park, a corn seller hawking his wares with a timid megaphone, the distant music of a birthday party. Real life, with its imperfections and messy beauty, began to flow back into the once hermetic spaces. Julian had started working from home 3 days a week. The meetings could wait. Video calls were sufficient for most corporate decisions. Slowly, he was rediscovering forgotten pleasures. Unhurried breakfasts, his father's stories of a country that no longer existed, Sophia's homework that they now did together at the dining table. That afternoon, while Anna and Maria organized the new room for Mr. Arthur, spacious, bright, with a comfortable armchair by the window and shelves for his few precious belongings, Julian sat across from his father on the balcony. 2 cups of coffee steamed between them. "Forgive me for not seeing, Dad," he said, his voice struggling to stay steady. "For letting this happen in my own house." Arthur watched his son. He didn't see the successful executive or the admired businessman, but the boy he once carried on his shoulders through the dirt roads of his hometown. His eyes, tired but serene, reflected a wisdom that money could never buy. "He who sees in time saves his heart," he answered in a quiet voice, stroking the rosary he no longer had to hide. "And you saw, son. Late, but you saw." Sophia approached with 2 matching ornate glasses. She filled them with fresh passion fruit juice that she had made with Maria, using her grandmother Lucy's recipe, rescued from Arthur's memory. "A toast to respect," she said, with the solemnity only children can give to important words. The 3 generations clinked their glasses. The sound, clean and musical, sealed an unspoken but deeply understood pact. Never again the complicit silence, never again negotiable dignity, never again love conditioned on status or appearance. That night, before sleeping in his new room, Arthur placed the yellowed newspaper clipping next to the worn rosary in his nightstand drawer, no longer as a wounded hope, but as a fulfilled promise. The moonlight streamed through the curtainless window, drawing silver patterns on the floor. Outside, the city breathed with its millions of simultaneous stories, some of pain, many of struggle, and a few, like his, of redemption. At the Eastwood Senior Center, Camilla began her community service the following week. Her perfectly manicured hands learned to hold spoons to feed those who couldn't feed themselves, to change bed sheets, to listen to repeated stories with a newfound patience. At first, she did it with resentment. Gradually, something shifted. Perhaps it was the unwavering dignity of Mrs. Mercedes, who, at 90 and confined to a wheelchair, thanked her for every small gesture with the generosity of someone who had lived too long to hold grudges. Perhaps it was the silent lesson in humility she received every morning when she walked through the center's doors. 6 months later, when Judge Wallace visited the center to check on her progress, he found a different woman, quieter, less polished, but paradoxically more present. The transformation wasn't dramatic or complete, but it was a beginning, and the community understood the lesson. Justice, when it arrives, is not merely punishment or revenge. It is balance restored. It is dignity returned. It is, in its deepest form, the chance to begin again on firmer ground. The water, once denied, now flowed for everyone, and with it, the ancient thirst for respect had finally found its course.